I'd always been told that a gunshot sounded different when the bullet had found its mark in a human body, but I never really believed this until a wet August night in Moscow in August 1991, towards the end of the putsch against Mikhail Gorbachev, which convulsed the world and in fact changed human history. That night, Russians on both sides of a major conflict, I think, pulled away from the idea of civil war. They knew how terrible it could be. Their parents had told them, some of them remembered it, and the sound of those bullets in Moscow made them realize how close they'd come to a massacre perhaps like the Tiananmen Square massacre in Peking a few years earlier. It was the first time I'd really seen serious human danger on the streets of Moscow. I'd been there for some years waiting for something to go wrong, and it suddenly did go wrong. Tanks came rolling up my street, churning up the dust. The whole city filled up with military vehicles and soldiers. Crowds milled about, wondering what was going on. Nobody knew what would happen. And you could see in the eyes of an awful lot of people fear that it might lead to the most appalling results. Endless war, mutilation, cruelty, because, of course, wars between brothers, civil wars, are far worse than all, was because you have to strip away all your inhibitions to fight your fellow countrymen. They feared it, and they were right to do so. When it looked as if there might be a new civil war in Russia last week, I was far from enthusiastic about the idea. I sensed among so many people, and among commentators and politicians, a feeling that perhaps it would be a good thing if Yevgeny Prigozhin's mercenaries actually did reach Moscow and there was fighting. I couldn't think that at all. I thought that the worst thing for Russia and for the world would be fighting. And the other thing I thought, and I was amazed at the calm and apparent enjoyment which some people seem to feel, I thought that people didn't realize how much worse Russia could be than it is even now. That there were many, many worse people than Vladimir Putin lurking in the background, ready to take over if he were to be overthrown. And this drove much of what I thought. It's driven much of what I've thought about the whole Ukraine war, in fact. Is it wise of us in our peaceful, stable, prosperous countries to wish for more chaos in countries where chaos is normal? Russia has been a country invaded, beset by revolution and foreign interference for centuries. The actual word in Russian for safety is a negative word, bezopasnost. It means without danger, because the default position in Russian life is danger. And yet we seem to think that it was just a game, that if one leader was overthrown, another would come along. Perhaps Andy Pandy or Goldilocks or Nick Clegg would take over from Vladimir Putin. But we saw on the sneering, swearing face of the jailbird Yevgeny Prigozhin, the man who was challenging Putin, we saw the face of what a new ruler of Russia might be like. Imagine in that case that this country, which is a hellhole in many ways and is very badly governed and immensely corrupt and chaotic, imagine if it fell into the hands of somebody like that, and if somebody like Yevgeny Prigozhin, or indeed Prigozhin himself, was the man with his finger on the Russian nuclear button, controlling fleets of nuclear submarines and arsenals of long-range missiles. I don't see why people are so keen on war in general. Do you really want that? Do you want to have somebody like Yevgeny Prigozhin with his finger on the nuclear button of what is still, despite its major decline in so many other areas, a huge and dangerous nuclear power? I don't think you do. People should think twice when these things happen. They should be careful what they wish for. If you wish for chaos in Russia, it won't stay in Russia. It will come here. And you may not care about the Russian people. I do, because I lived among them for 2.5 years and I came to like them. I had Russian friends and I admired in many ways their stoicism and their humor and lots of other things about them. That may not bother you as it bothers me, but you should certainly care about this country. If Russia falls into chaos, we will not be safe from it. Be careful what you wish for.